toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of Guidance.
Welcome to the sixth and final class of the Living in the Resurrection Body series. And I'd like to begin with a poem that I wrote for you. It's called Light Upon Light. Do you feel in what esteem you are held? With what familiarity and endearment? Settle down and cease parceling things out. Sink down into your roots and smell the earthy soil that renews you again and again. Now release the precious freight of your heart's concerns and even hopes and dreams. Let them rise up to us here waiting with open arms, mirroring your every move as you pass the baton, complete the connection, surrender the weight, accept the truth that you are and always were and always will be breath of our breath, flesh of our flesh, heart of our hearts, created in concert with the most profound melodies that rise up with you as the sacred offering. You are this moment's treasure, given into the arms of all those you love most dearly from the beginning of time. Light upon light.
So the theme of our class tonight is called Care and Maintenance of the Resurrection Body, parentheses, an Owner's Manual. So many of you have spent 12 sessions with us exploring the birthing of a resurrection body and living in the resurrection body. And so during this class, we're going to focus on some ways of how we can put to good use what we've learned in a practical way. But I'd like to begin with just a brief practice, and just listen to me say the waza you to go with this, and then there's a little prayer that goes with this. And this is a practice for us to remind ourselves of the incredible blessing and the gratitude that we feel for what we've been given, that we are a unique expression of the divine being manifest in life. In the yogic tradition and also in Buddhism, it says it's very rare to achieve a human birth in this physical realm. So it's a rare blessing. So this practice, and you can just listen to me say the three waza. They are Yasami, which means the divine hearing, Yabasir, which means the divine seeing, and Yashakur, which means the divine gratitude. So I'm just going to say these three times, and you can just listen. Sami, divine hearing, Basir, divine seeing, and Shakur, divine gratitude. Then I'm going to say a little prayer. Yasami, Ya Basir, Ya Shakur, Ya Sami, Ya Basir, Ya Shakur, Ya Sami, Ya Basir, Ya Shakur. And the prayer: for all that I hear, and thou that hears me, for all that I see, and thou that sees me, I give thanks. I'll say that once more. For all that I hear, and thou that hears me, for all that I see, and thou that sees me, I give thanks. So, what do we do with this resurrection body once we've awakened to it? And we recognize that this is an ongoing process of creation. It's never finished, because it's always evolving in response to what we bring to our side of the human divine being that we are, and what's created from that and what's evolved from that. And we'll have many times when we return or go back to our typical state of consciousness, which is usually separated and limited and caught up in circumstances. But hopefully from things that you've gleaned along the way in the course of these 12 sessions and your own practices and your own realizations, you're finding it easier and easier to get back into that place of very deep connection, that place of being in relational unity, that place of being in the barzakh, or the meeting place between our manifest self and the divine or transcendent part of our being, and what arises from that. And I would say most importantly, learning how to be in a very grounded, connected, very present state of being in the thick of life. So this is not being in a very etheric state, removed from the world, just kind of tuning out the difficulties around us, but getting right into the midst of circumstances and being able to bring about openings from experiences that in the past would have caused us to react or constrict in our being. To be able to open up and unfold the way any of a number of divine qualities have a platform or a venue to emerge through us right in the midst of that circumstance that opens up a whole new space of possibilities that excuse me, previously wasn't present. So as I've said many times, we have so many opportunities in every single day of our life, reminders that life gives us to be able to switch gears, to be able to shift into this much fuller state of not just consciousness, because we might think, well, okay, now I'm aware of a deeper level of reality, but this is like a deeper state of actual beingness, the way that we are, the way that we relate, the way that we experience with whatever we're in relationship with, whether it be another person or people, whether it be something in nature, whether it be a difficulty that we're trying to find a solution to, and we're just really stuck and puzzled, and the gears turn in our head, but we can't figure out something. But then we allow ourselves to open, to be in that state of receptivity, that inner state of quietness, and trusting that if we open to that connection with a deeper state of our being, with a sincere intention, an answer will come. It won't necessarily come in the form that we think it should, or even that we wish it should. It won't necessarily come immediately, but there will always be a response. Hazrat Inayat Khan said there is no desire in the human heart that's not ultimately fulfilled, whether it's in this life or beyond. So knowing that every genuine, sincere desire of our heart will be fulfilled, and there is always, always, in bold and underlined and italics and all capitals, there's always a way to open up even the most difficult, seemingly hopeless circumstance for something to emerge in it. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everything's going to be happily ever after, or that the problem will go away. And it's so easy to look around and see how many terrible things there are going on in the world right now. And that is a reality. So this is not just going, well, it's all good, we're just going to not deal with it. We're called to become involved in whatever way fits with what's trying to come through in us, what is our dharma, what is our way of expressing that unique divinity that can only come through us. And that's different for each person, and it's in very many different ways. So it's what may be the just right thing for one person isn't going to be right for another. And as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, better one's own dharma, however imperfectly performed, than to do the dharma of another person, however perfectly performed.
Mhm. So let's take a real focused look at the resurrection body. We've learned different descriptions of it. And I think one wonderful way of looking at it is through a metaphor that's given by the teacher Ahmad Asai. And you can find more about him in Spiritual Body and Celestial Earth. But this is a metaphor that includes the alchemical process. And a lot of us know about the alchemical process that through which often in a retreat, let's say a setting, or even in our practices, we go through fana, in which we release what we have thought we were and how we're doing things already, and then we look at baka, which shows us the new step, the resurrection, the opening to something new. So it's a breaking down and then a putting together, and then often an annealing process that takes place to firm that up. But we're going to look at actual chemical situation here, the formation of a diamond. So think about all these different steps, and between each step is an addition of an elixir, or you could say of an essence. In our meditation practices, we would think of this maybe as a quality of the divine, how we add a wazifa to our practice, and that has an effect on us. So let's use it a little bit different way here in actual chemical formula. So if someone takes silica and potash, there are two elements that are opaque. They don't have any shine to them. They are kind of dirt or dense looking. But if you add an elixir to it and heat it, it turns to glass. Glass, if you think about glass has a lot more qualities than the silica and potash. For example, it's reflective. It allows light to come through it. It shines. It allows other images in the room, let's say, to come through. So there are more qualities in the glass than there were in the original elements. And if you take this substance and add heat to this and an elixir to this, it can turn into crystal. And crystal is somewhat like glass, but crystal has more qualities, doesn't it? If you think of a crystal, well, it could actually produce heat. Heat something. It can align things. The parts of the crystal are much more aligned and have a beautiful shape and a shine that you don't find in regular glass. So each time what's happening is it's gaining more and more qualities. Just like in our meditations, as we learn, after a while, we've got a collection of 30, 40 different wazifas, and each one of them is having an effect on us, bringing in more spirit to the body and changing us, until finally, okay, look back at our chemical process here. From the crystal, adding an elixir to that and heating it can produce a diamond. A lot of pressure, I would think, would create the diamond. And the diamond definitely has a very special kind of quality of being able to show really what's all around it, very much like you'd imagine the resurrection body, as we talked about before, that has a very amazing reflective property. So really, this keeps developing more and more a combination of physical, or the body, and the spirit. And one is now within the other. One is saturated with the other. And finally, even the stage of alchemical change ends up in being the elixir itself. So now the diamond has become elixir. so that all these different changes refined this substance in many different ways, so that now it has incorporated many of the aspects that before it didn't have. And this is a metaphor now for what happens to our bodies and our minds as we go through the alchemical process. In other words, meditate and bring in the wazaif, and certainly the way, different ways that we think of ourselves and different ways that we transform. So what is really happening here? And we talked about Svarna as being light and also as being beingness. It is a very special kind of light. In fact, it is said in the Zoroastrian tradition that we all of beings in existence have been formed from Svarna, and that it, because we're all formed from Svarna, which is really light being, it is beingness and light. We are possibly in our solid state, in our bodies, very close to what is spirit, in that it's light being, but in another form. So just as we looked at this process, this chemical process of transformation, this is something that we all have within us, this possibility of transformation. So that we might think that, well, we have this body, and this is the body that we are working with in different ways, maybe doing some purification of different kinds. We're doing yoga, and but we don't think about the body of the spiritual body. And so this is this aspect of ourselves that is eternal, and it's kind of hard to think about at this stage. But this is what we've been forming in the practices that we've been doing, and it's an intermediary step to think about being aware of these inner spheres, and the transformation that can come through to us in becoming the essence itself is very profound. All of the unique aspects of each one of us. I'm looking at some of you on the screen here and thinking about you, and you have your own way in the world. And as we find that we can contribute to life, and we work with that, and we work with what we feel needs to be transformed, and we bring in the new things, and we work with qualities, maybe through the work with the guide. The beautiful wisdom that comes through this is called Chabir. That is the wisdom gained in our experiences in life, Ya Chabir. And then another wazifa, that this one is about the essence, like the essence that has been distilled through this process that we talked about. You're going through all of these different stages, and especially going through life with these learnings and making ourselves available to all of the spirit in the midst of life. We can say Ya Qayyum, the essence. So this is the essence that is produced from all of our experiences in life and from our meditations. So I'm going to say these words together, and thinking about that wisdom gained in life that now transforms us, and we give back this essence into life. We become the essence through our internal strivings and work in the world. And this is converted into the elixir of life. So I'll say it about 3 times, and you can join in with me. Ya Habir, Ya Qayyum, 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 Ya Habir, Ya Qayyum. One more time. Ya Habir, Ya Qayyum. Now as we exhale, we think Habir. As we inhale, Qayyum. Now just feel the essence. So why did I bring this to your attention? Because since we are made of a substance which is at the same time spirit and the same time body, the body itself, after a while, can have, through its very essence, thoughts which are thought in the celestial world. And spirits that depend upon these bodies perceive a corporeal realities. So this resurrection body becomes really the transducer between the world of the spirit and the world of the body. Just like when you sit sometimes and try to focus on a being, perhaps someone you knew or someone whose work that you have read, and you can really feel that being speaking to you, not just summarizing what they had said before, but speaking in a totally different way. So you can become this philosopher's stone, is another word for it, or essence. You can become the Svarna, the light that began all of the universe. And in life, as Azurbash was saying, in all the activities even we have in life, if we are this manifest being that somehow has our head in the heavens, somehow something that is between the body and the spirit, that incorporates all these qualities, this is a place where the divine can experience life. This is a place where what we produce can be sensified and devoted to all of a creation. So this is the resurrection body that I'm speaking of.
So the Sufis say, or at least some of the Sufis say, that God cannot incarnate into manifestation, but God can experience manifestation through the created beings. So even Arabi says that God confers upon the human a mode of existence, and the human confers upon God a mode of knowing. So each side is in need of the other to fulfill the ultimate purpose for why we're here. And how do we awaken this capacity to be able to more fully experience the divine, to come to the Barzakh, to participate in this never-ending alchemical process, not just of our, what we think of as our side of things, our manifest being, but an alchemical transformation of the relationship itself between the human and divine aspects of our being. We're actually evolving both sides through this process. So we have to become capable through the faculty that we've been talking about many times of creative imagination, of being able to open up and discover a different modality of experience and a different modality of understanding than the typical one, which is based on just logical, rational reasoning and a dualistic state of consciousness. We have to be able to enter in to a state of relational consciousness that is continually in a process of circulation and emergence, and continually in a process of light upon light. So we enable God to have a means of experience of Him herself through us, and God enables us to have an experience of God, our unique way of experiencing God through awakening this faculty of creative imagination. And together in this relationship that is fully emergent in the resurrection body, then the fulfillment of this process takes place. And as I've said before, it's a never-ending process. There's a new creation born at every instant. We participate. What do we bring to this? We bring our deepest desire that started out as the divine impulse that brought about the creation of our being. But as the practice we just did with Habir, there's been a wisdom gained through life's experience that the divine couldn't have had without our own experience, that adds to that, that transmutes that desire. So now there's a possibility of something arising that even the divine being couldn't have known to begin with. So as I've said before, it's not like this predetermined blueprint that we're just, looking at the specs and getting out of the way and doing this and that. We are actively involved in this process, but we're not involved in it by, on our end, prefiguring what we think it's supposed to be. Just like an artist or a musician that may have an inspiration for a painting or a composition, you might have a general idea of what you're trying to express, whether it's an emotion or that maybe some images come to mind or some themes that come to mind. But if you deeply engage in that process, then something arises through that interaction that you couldn't have cooked up on your end to start with. And it's different from what was there to start with, the seed of that inspiration. It's that ever newness that can come through.
And so I'd have to jump in here about the creative process. It's so important that we are feeling the pleasure and the joy of our creation as we are doing the creation, rather than agreeing to a commission and just forcing ourselves to take one step after another. And it is so much more about that, as Azubash was saying, that relationship with the divine, and at the same time feeling the care of the divine for us as this artist, as this one who is moving the hands with the heart and the mind united with God. That great care and love of that takes us way beyond the mundane aspects of what we're doing, and just tucks us right into God.
And the inspiration, the invocation that we begin all our classes with, if I was going to put a little addition onto it, it might be something like this. Toward the one, the never-ending perfecting of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being united with all the illuminated, awakening souls that are the eyes, the ears, the hands, the feet of the divine being expressing him herself ever more fully through existence. That we are each a part of that network of awakened and awakening beings. And I can't emphasize this enough, that we matter, that we have something that we bring to this process. And we've said it over and over again, but I hope that you really hear it and let it go into the depths of your being. Each of us has got something that can only come through us in all of existence, past, present, future, in any realm of existence, that can only come through us. And without fulfilling that dharma, you could say there's something missing in all of existence. It'd be like a symphony, and if one instrument wasn't there, well, you might not be able to tell exactly what was off about it, but if you were very familiar with really wonderful performances, you might have a sense something's missing here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but something, as we talked about, I believe last time, about what I call the eliciting light of Sophia, that twofold way of looking at the forces of the divine creative process. One is the impetus of the desire that started with the divine impulse, that's transformed, that comes through us, that ishq, to move towards something, to move towards a fulfillment. But then this eliciting light of Sophia, it's like a pull. It's something that's drawing from us a becomingness that's yet unknown of what it's going to be, but it's a longing for something more, ever more fulfillment. And you can fill in the blanks with any of the divine qualities, a longing for ever greater beauty, ever greater compassion, ever greater wisdom, ever greater truth, ever greater light, ever greater understanding, that we have all of eternity to participate in this process. And we are each part of, I like to call it a cosmic neural network of awakening and awakened beings, that each is plugging in his or her own way. And this includes other aspects of existence, of animals, and even Osprey Night Khan said every atom is going to have its moment of awakening. Everything that there is participating in this process of collective awakening. But that's just, in a sense, that's the beginning. Okay, so what happens after awakening? What do you do with it? What happens after you have developed the capacity for your resurrection body? What do you do with that? What are the possibilities of that? And then it's like the different quantum levels of an electron. There's higher and higher orbitals as there's greater energy, and there's more and more light that would be released as the electron goes from a higher orbital. It releases that energy. What are the possibilities that can occur throughout existence when more and more beings become harmoniously aligned with each other and not dissolving into just one soup, so to speak, with a loss of identity, but each maintaining their own part of the identity, but each contributing to something that's arising from that. And sometimes what is arising is a desire for healing, collective healing throughout existence. And the kind of the archetype of this would be the archangel Raphael, that embodies all of the ways that healing can take place in any realm of existence, and so on with the other archangels and beings throughout all the realms of existence and the particular domains of the masters and saints and prophets. Each has got a part to play in this, and so do we. Yes.
So we're saying, well, so what do I do next? What is my part in this? And that's a wonderful question, and it involves us as loving, as full of Hima, the energy of creation, and the energy that creates. And we spoke about before. It's that the story that needs to be told about each one of us, and it needs to be filling this heart that we have, and fulfilling what our heart is asking for. This is a bigger story than the reality that we've been given, the reality that we usually see, where we have things separated as this long string of the past and the future, and here we have just a little bit of the territory. And then also we think of all of the spheres, we think of the planets, we think of the sun and all these giant bodies, and here we little bitty teeny us. This does not fulfill looking at things this way. This is why Jesus said, no, I and my Father are one. He's our wonderful example of what we call filiation, which means knowing that you are the son or the daughter of this great one. We also talked about Sventa Almighty, and some of us took the pledge that we are the son or the daughter of the Sventa Almighty, the Earth Mother. These grand thoughts that somehow give us a plan also. What is our plan then? Well, we are living in concert with our divine Father, Mother, brothers, world. And in this situation, we won't be left alone to try to figure it out. Everything around us, here we are in this resurrection body. We are getting closer to understanding this, but one thing about resurrection body is that there's nothing outside of the resurrection body. Everything is part of that resurrection body. And things have their own ways, but we see messages in things that are around us. We have messages coming from within us. We create, and we make music, and we make drawings, and we speak with people, and here's meaningfulness all around us. So in this situation of the resurrection body, we have many opportunities for revelation and intuition, and that way will be presented to us. The way is presented to each one of us. I know it already is. It's the kind of thing where you're walking and you don't know what's going to be under your foot when you put it down, but you walk anyway. You reach out and you do, and you have confidence, and you know who you are. You are that son, that daughter of the divine, and you have a divine story. You have the allegory of your soul. We kind of gave you some examples of some allegories of soul, and I'm sure that you're starting to look around and think, well, how is it that I really do feel this grand symphony, this harmony with everything, and me included in that, not as this little speck, but as related to all of it and beloved of all of it.
So earlier, Ravani Ra talked about the elixirs that enable the changes, the chemical changes, and another term for that could be catalysts. Catalyst is something that enables a reaction to take place, but it's not used up in that. So as we've talked about before, and I did a whole other series that was called Spiritual Awakening and Service to the World, that initially we tend to feel that our process of awakening, which could include our developing our resurrection body, is something for our own benefit. And it certainly is a benefit to what we think of as ourself. But in the process of that awakening and establishment of that higher order of being, we likely discover that it's a process of service to everything, that we are now becoming capable of really living our Dharma, which is the reason why we're here. And the work that what we've been sharing with you for these many times stems from what we call the Gabrielite work. And why do we call it that? Well, Gabriel is the divine messenger. And as I've said before, usually we think of Gabriel as just bringing a message down from God to someone or to the world in general, an annunciation. But through all that we've been talking about, this relational state of unity between our manifest and divine self, each of us has something that's the returning wisdom. The practice we did earlier, Ravani Ra led with Habir, the wisdom that's gained through life, the wisdom the divine gains of its own being through our experience. So in that sense, each of us is Gabriel to everything else. And are we all the same Gabriel? No, each of us has a different message that comes through us. Each of us is a different expression of the divine countenance. And everything in all of existence, one of the underlying forces or desires of everything is to announce itself, to reveal itself, to express itself, to be the fruit that comes from the divine seed embedded in everything to blossom forth in manifestation. So not only can the divine being experience that previously unknown and untasted aspect of its own being, but for every other form of the divine in every realm of existence to be able to partake of that means of experience that can only come through us. So I'd like to have us share a practice now. It kind of represents this, and it's a different form of a practice we did some time ago. Those of you may remember when we did the practice Ish Baka Mawjud Allah, which was the longing for the human side to experience God in the fullest possible way through the resurrection body, the longing of the divine being to experience itself in the fullest possible way through our awakened self, the ishq of both sides to experience the other. But this is a little different. This practice is Ishq Allah Kudus, which means pure spirit, and Baka, which means resurrection. And the meaning of this practice is the longing for both the human and the divine to experience what emerges through spirit, Kudus, bringing about the resurrection that takes place in the new creation that arises in every instant. So at every instant, the resurrection body is not just something, okay, it's a done deal, and you go on for there. It's recreated at every instant. It's recreated anew, and what can arise from it is recreated anew. So this practice is the longing for both sides to be able to partake of that new creation that's previously unknown, that can only come through the love and the drawing together of the two sides. So we'll do this again in the form of the zikr. The ish, as the head goes in 3/4 of a circle. Allah, head goes down. Kudus, pure spirit. And then Baka, the resurrection. So once again, we're feeling this pull of longing for the two sides, but in this case, it's not so much the two sides longing for each other, the two sides each longing for the new creation that arises through the resurrection body, which is an amalgam of the human and divine sides. It could not happen through the manifest side by itself. It cannot happen from the divine side by itself. It can only happen by both sides in this ongoing relationship. So I'll do it a few times, then join with me. Again, the words are Ish, 3/4 of a circle, Allah, head down, Kudus, head up, and then Baka in the heart. Ish, Allah, Kudus, Baka. Ish, Allah, Kudus, Baka. Join with me. Ish, Allah, Kudus, Ish. Allah. Kudus. 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 Once more. Ish. Allah. Kudus. And silently on the breath, as the head goes in the 3/4 of a circle and you think Ish, Allah, exhale, and then inhale down on Kudus and continue inhaling on Baka, and then just pause ever so briefly and then begin again. So exhale, as the head goes on Ish, silently, Allah, and then inhale down Kudus, inhale up Baka at your own rate. And then without the head movement and without the words, just feel that it's arising at every instant, ever evolving fulfillment of the divine creative process that we uniquely contribute to.
So we really like to give you some more ideas about this care for our own resurrection body and how to maintain this evolution. One thing is caring for yourself and having compassion with yourself. So, like we said, in this resurrection body, there are many, really it's a meeting of many of our inner worlds and outer worlds. And part of that is that part of us that watches the shahid, the witness to what this being goes through during the day. And you might take a look and say, wow, I really have been asking an awful lot of myself here. No wonder I've been so exhausted. So that kind of awareness, kind of a motherly look at your own being and caring for that being And there's certainly no reason for working so hard in neglect of your own energy, your own magnetism, balance, looking at the balance in your life. The self-evaluation in different ways can be a wonderful guide. Being your own guide, being your own best friend. It's very important to do. And then mastery.
Well, and then being an ecologist of your own being, and that includes being an ecologist of your energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we can use the whole domain of healing as an example. It is possible to do some methods of healing where you're imparting your own physical magnetism to someone else. And when you do that, they'll feel better temporarily. And if you continue doing that, you'll become depleted and perhaps will even get sick. And ultimately, you haven't done anybody much good, including yourself. But there's a way of doing healing where you are tapping into a divine power that doesn't result in that. So it's not your own, you're not acting from your limited sense of self. So when we act from our limited sense of self, that's a likely recipe to get burned out, to get exhausted, to get sick. We don't take proper care of ourselves. So when we're awakening to deeper levels of our being, we are establishing the groundwork to become capable of experiencing much more energy, much higher frequencies of vibration. And it's important that we have everything in balance when we do that, because if we don't, something is going to go wrong. It can affect our nervous system. It can affect our just general mental health. It can affect our physical state of being. And that's why it's very important in practices like in the Sufi practices. One of the basic but very important practices is working with the elemental purification breaths, which many of you are familiar with. And these are practices that's like tuning ourselves every day to the vibrations of different elements. And doing this simple practice helps to keep us healthy. And also, as Ravani Rao was saying, recognizing when we're trying to do just too much, when we don't take that time to replenish our energy. And that includes, it's really important to make some time each day to do some kind of practice, Pure Light would say, that keeps you in trim. You know, we do things to maintain our physical health, we exercise, that's great, but it's important that we do things to keep ourselves spiritually in trim. And if you have a guide, then you probably have had practices recommended to you, and it's important that you follow through on those and check with your guide regularly. If you don't have a guide, and if you found some practices, perhaps some of the ones that we've suggested here, or ones you've come across from other places that help you feel grounded and in balance and more connected with life. A good indicator is if you're doing something that's just making you really spacey, you might think, oh, this is really enjoyable. I don't have to think about my problems. Well, Pure Light called this the spiritual bypass, and you're likely setting yourself up for a hard fall if you do that. Spirituality ultimately should make us much more capable to deal with all of the circumstances in our life and to be fully grounded. If I was going to say one of the aims of what we're sharing with you is to learn how to become fully grounded in the multidimensional reality of our being. So it's developing an accessibility of consciousness throughout the whole spectrum of vibrational states of our consciousness, including subtle realms, but always feeling each of those as an integral part of the wholeness of who we are. So none of them just being separated from the rest, or none of them is like, well, it's all up here and very little down here. And if you are feeling like whatever you've been doing is keeping you from being grounded and making you spacey, then it's time to find some other kind of practice to do. It could be a walking meditation with your eyes open. It could be just sitting in nature. It could be attuning to beings who are very much grounded in their lives. Some of the great master saints and prophets are beings that embody tremendous mastery, such as Shiva. And in our upcoming series that I think almost everybody from this group is going to continue in, called Becoming a Human Divine Being, we're going to be talking a fair amount about mastery. It's like the way that we go about doing things in our life really makes a difference. And sometimes we think, well, only these things are really important, and these things, yeah, let me just get them over with. But if we can have an awareness that the way we go about doing whatever it is that we're doing is helping to keep us in trim, that's helping us to build up a greater capacity for even more coming through our being, then we're going to become much more capable through our practices.
So we've said many different things and given many different, lots of advice. And what I wanted to plug right now is that your heart knows. Your heart knows. Your heart has been listening to all this. And your heart has it all stored somewhere within, and will give you little nudges. And becoming more and more intuitive and more at one with that heart, I feel like, is way most important thing.
And
Go ahead.
Well, it's said, I think, in many different traditions that the heart is the meeting place between the human and divine. And if you're familiar with the Sephiroth in the Kabbalah, the central place in the Kabbalah is called Tifereth, which is the heart center. And it's the halfway midpoint between manifestation and the transcendent levels, and all the pathways pass through that heart. And so if we are open, as Ravani Ra is saying, to what's going on in our heart, and we pay attention to that, and I think I mentioned earlier when someone asked Murshid Sam, how do you know if something's a good thing to do? And his answer was, if when you think about it, light comes from your eyes, it's good to do, and if it doesn't, don't do it. Well, another add-on to that would be is if it makes your heart feel more open, makes you feel more connected, then it's probably something good to do. If it makes you feel cut off, constricted, reactive, then probably need to take another look at things and figure out, well, how can I establish a different relationship, a way of relating to what's going on that's going to bring about an opening instead of a closing down.
And remember that heart is the place that we're speaking of, where Hima comes from, with this ability that's the place where our intuition and our imagination resides too. And it's that happy heart that's going to be giving you incredible connections with beings and your own place in this creation. It'll tell you, I think this beloved one, I know one friend calls it her own divine child. Give you a little whisper, Mommy, sweetheart, what do you think of this? You feel, oh, that feels so nice to think about that. So very simple. It's all very simple. So now it's almost like you have this huge encyclopedia of possibilities and stages and, hats that you'll wear and all different things you'll do. And so now all you need to do is play with that. Be your own self. Enjoy it.
And let's close this whole series with the Buddhist prayer. With the thought of love, let us encompass the world, and may that love, increasing without measure, encompass the whole universe up to its confine. With the thought of wisdom, let us encompass the world, and may that wisdom, increasing without limit, encompass the whole universe up to its confine. And with the thought of joy, let us encompass the world, and may that joy, increasing without limit, encompass the whole universe up to its confine. Amen.